What an honor to be with the Secretary of Energy, one of the probably most important, in my view, cabinets that the president talked a lot about during his campaign, energy and our country's independence. The source of our energy. We can be completely energy independent if we take advantage of it. Mr. Secretary, Chris Wright, glad to be with you today, sir.
Honored to be here and proud to be part of this team. President Trump got elected to get rid of the nonsense and bring common sense back to Washington, D.C. And boy, he is aggressively in pursuit of a common sense agenda that'll expand opportunities for Americans, starting with lowering their prices.
Amen. I'm going to be honest with you, all right? When I drive through a pristine setting like the Pocono Mountains of Pennsylvania or the beautiful farm fields of the Midwest, and I see those giant wind turbines, Mr. Secretary, it breaks my heart because I find them kind of silly. I know some people say that's part of an energy portfolio, but where do you come down on that sort of thing and solar panels versus natural gas, nuclear, drilling?
Well, I love the way you framed that, Chris, because I also love the outdoors. My wife and I are mountain climbers, skiers, adventurers. I've been a longtime board member of an environmental group. I had to resign from the board, a free market environmental group in Bozeman, Montana, that uses property rights and incentives to protect wilderness and fishing and clean water and clean air. So all Americans want that stuff.
Yes.
All Americans want that stuff. But now we justify, in the name, in theory of environmentalism, all sorts of restriction on the energy resources, hydrocarbons, and nuclear you mentioned, that actually the impact is exactly the opposite.
Yes.
You can produce over 70% of all the energy consumed in America comes from oil and gas. And if you ask people, have you ever seen an oil and gas well? Most Americans have not.
Right.
Because that land footprint is relatively small, but everyone has seen wind turbines because they're all over the place. And wind energy, in terms of primary energy, supplied a little less than 2% of total American energy, yet we can see it all over the place and everywhere we go.
May I ask, Mr. Secretary, a sincere question? I mean, and if the answer is do they have a place and you support them, that's fine. I don't mean to be argumentative that way, but I just look at them, the footprint, knowing that they're mechanical, they break down over time. Really, even if you were a huge advocate, how are they green, really? How are they offsetting carbon footprints and all of this business? It doesn't seem like it would, even if that was your goal.
I think by the traditional definition of green, I would say no. If you take a lot of land, a lot of materials, of course they kill a lot of bats and birds and insects, and that's a growing concern. They just they have a huge impact on the footprint of the surface of the earth, and of course the manufacturing to make those materials, to make those wind turbines. Huge amount of imports from China, huge amount of industrial activity. So it takes much more energy to build a wind turbine than to build the system to produce from oil or gas or coal.
Yes.
The same amount of energy. So I wouldn't call them green, but I'm for all sources of energy that make energy affordable, reliable, and secure. So I'm not only like these sources of energy and I don't like those, but wind's track record in that area hasn't been so good.
Isn't Europe the canary in the coal mine for where we were headed previously, our energy policies? Meaning, I read stories when it would get deeply cold in some places of Germany where people preferred to burn furniture rather than turn on their thermostat because it was so costly to heat their home. And it's because of green policies that swept Europe. I fear, thankfully, you guys put the foot on the brakes there. I fear that's where we were headed here.
Canary in the coal mine is the perfect way to describe that. Germany undertook, starting about 15, 16 years ago, an energy transition, an Energiewende. They spent over $500 billion in an economy much smaller than ours. So that's like the U.S. spending $4 trillion, $5 trillion. And what did they get out of it? They more than doubled, nearly tripled the average price of their electricity. On cold days, much higher than that. They displaced their industry outside of their country. Their auto manufacturing industry is dying. They've had zero economic growth in 2 years. And they went from 80% of all their energy from hydrocarbons to 74% of all their energy to hydrocarbons. They didn't meaningfully change their dependence on hydrocarbons, but they made energy expensive, impoverishing their systems. their citizens, and worst of all, they're just displacing all the manufacturing, the industrial might of Germany out of their country.
And so to that point, if it were up to you and you were king, although you've got a president who I know is 100% with you on your energy policy prescriptions, where do I've heard it said all of the above. That's fine, but we can't escape petroleum and developing and drilling for oil and natural gas, can we? We're not going to escape that as the cheapest way to get the most amount of energy to people in the near future. Can we technologically?
We cannot. And look, a funny story. When I grew up, there was a belief we were running out of oil and gas, and the industrial civilization was going to collapse. The world was going to end when I was a kid too, and it was also hydrocarbons. But then it was we were running out of them. I went to college to work on nuclear energy. I worked on solar energy in graduate school and geothermal energy right after that. My life mission was to energize the world, and I thought it had to come from non-hydrocarbon sources because we were running out of those. How wrong I was. And quick numbers on that. 85% of world energy came from hydrocarbons 50 years ago. 85% of world energy comes from hydrocarbons today.
Really?
So it turns out energy is hard,
yes.
And the advantages of hydrocarbons, oil, gas, and coal, are just compelling.
And Mr. Secretary, when you're pushing electric cars, and I don't know how you feel about those, I'm not even taking a position on those, but when you say let's plug in our cars, where in the world do you get the energy to make everything plug in? I call them plug-in cars. Coal-fired cars is what I call them. You have to have an energy source to power all of these things that are electric on the roads, don't you?
So that's half the story, and you are absolutely right. Today, 15 years ago, our biggest source of energy was coal. Today, it's natural gas, electricity. Natural gas is by far our biggest source of electricity, followed by coal and nuclear. So yeah, that's how electric cars are powered. But also, to build an electric car is very energy intensive. To build batteries and aluminum instead of steel, it takes 2.5 times as much energy to build an electric car of the same size of an internal combustion, a gasoline-powered, diesel-powered car.
Yes.
So the actual consumption of hydrocarbons in an electric car is no lower than it is in an internal combustion engine car. You're just displacing gasoline demand to power the car into diesel demand to power the mining machines to make an electric car, natural gas to charge the electricity, coal to make the metals in the batteries. So
if someone's buying an electric car for the express purpose of the environment, it's kind of a moot point.
Yeah, they're certainly not reducers of greenhouse gas emissions. If your issue is climate change, I would say they're not needle movers there at all.
Yeah.
The quick story on electric cars, they're very popular in China. More than half the electric cars are built and used in China. And I think
and we should say one of the most famous members of this administration makes electric cars, Elon Musk.
Absolutely, yeah, tremendous cars in Tesla. But in China, they drive electric cars for two reasons. Number one, they're by far the world's biggest importer of oil. The United States has become a net exporter of oil, but as a huge importer of oil, and most of their population doesn't have cars yet, they would rather run their cars on Chinese coal than imported oil. So it's sort of a national, hey, let's use the resources we have. And they do have urban air quality problems in their cities. So an electric car has no tailpipe emissions, so it does help air quality at the point of the car. And then if you can power it with coal plants that are further out of the cities, maybe it helps them with urban air quality. But Chinese aren't buying electric cars for climate reasons.
Yeah.
They're buying them to power them on Chinese coal as opposed to imported oil.
I'll let you go on this question. You talk about power sources and the need. I have been reading with great fascination Microsoft, Google, and other big tech firms are onlining nuclear facilities for their own needs in artificial intelligence. You talk about it. I had no concept until I really started reading what AI and this embrace of AI culturally and technologically is going to mean for our energy needs. That's going to take a ton of it.
It is. And I view AI as the next energy-intensive manufacturing industry. And what we're manufacturing is intelligence that will meaningfully improve our lives, help in drug discovery and so many other things. So AI is exciting, but is an energy hog. To win the AI race, you got to win the energy race. So the last 4 years under the Biden administration, we had almost no growth in demand for electricity, yet prices went up almost 30%. That's just crushing, with no increase in demand. Now we're going to have rapid increase in demand for electricity because of AI, and so we need to build more capacity, get rid of the nonsense, keep that energy-intensive manufacturing industry in the United States without impacting our consumers and further driving up electricity prices. President Trump's agenda is to stop the rise of electricity prices and try to move in the other direction, downwards.
Secretary Wright, I sincerely mean it when I say, of all of these cabinet posts, all important, yours is one of the most significant, and I think helping people save costs at home. So thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you so much. I'm proud to be here with this president and proud to be on your show.